I'm going to tell you a little bit about carbon literacy and a little bit about COP and a little bit about why museums and galleries are involved in today's day, in today's focus day. So first of all, what is carbon literacy? Some of you may already be very familiar with it. You may never have come across the concept before. But basically, carbon literacy is a low carbon culture change project, which we started almost 9 years ago now. But carbon literacy is basically a day's worth of learning about climate change. One of the things that's unusual about carbon literacy are some of the qualities and the unique qualities that it carries with it. So as an example, we're a not-for-profit organisation. The Carbon Literacy Project is owned by the Carbon Literacy Trust, which is a registered charity. Carbon literacy was started when we pulled together a working group of 30 people, drawn from all walks of life, all sorts of organisations, who all collaborated together to create a definition for the term carbon literacy, and then created a standard that described a day's worth of learning about low carbon futures that would work in all contexts. So it would be both consistent for all these different types of organisations, yet at the same time adapted for all those organisations. And this approach was unique. It was a not-for-profit approach. It was a collaborative approach with people from all walks of life working together. The training materials would be consistent everywhere, yet adapted everywhere. And the delivery model was non-centralized. So there was no training company or training organization sitting behind this. All the participant organizations could pick up the materials and deliver them themselves. And most importantly, it led directly to action. It wasn't a passive piece of learning. Carbon literacy is a very active piece of learning, where you start your learning and then at the end of the day, you take or commit to an action as an individual and an action as a wider group of people. And as a result, carbon literacy starts to form part of the solution to climate change that we all seek. One of the other things that's unique about carbon literacy is the way that it transcends sectors and works at scale. So as I'm recording this now, just before the COP climate negotiations are about to begin, 23,000 people have undertaken this pathway already and have therefore generated 46,000 actions drawn from all walks of life, from all sectors, but all designed to reduce our carbon footprint and begin to address the challenge of climate change. So what is COP26? So COP stands for the Conference of Parties. It's the United Nations bringing together, almost without exception, every nation in the world to agree, hopefully, an agreement between nations as to how we collectively deal with climate change, reduce our carbon emissions, and pay for that process. Climate change is the biggest existential threat threatening mankind probably in our entire history. And this meeting is arguably one of the most important meetings in human history. If we get an agreement at COP, it can make a material difference to the way we deal with things. If we don't, it's going to be incredibly difficult. So it's a vital meeting. The Carbon Literacy Project has been invited by the UN as an official observer organisation. So that's one of the reasons that we're involved. But we've chosen to use that opportunity to showcase all the different action that's happening on climate change. So each day of the COP conference, we're working with a different sector that we work with. We're working with local authorities and universities, social housing, the automotive industry, communities and corporates. And one of those audiences is museums and galleries. So why museums and galleries? Well, you probably know better than I do the role of museums and galleries in society, both to entertain, but also to educate, to inform people, but also inspire them, to use some of the things found and created in the past to inspire and hopefully shape a better future. And that happens both in the real world, in physical spaces, and increasingly in the virtual world. So why would museums as cultural institutions not want to engage with this huge existential threat? We started working some 5 or 6 years ago now with Manchester Museum and Museum Development Northwest, who created a carbon literacy training course, which they then rolled out. The museum became a carbon literate organisation and then a carbon literate training organisation, and started collaborating with museums and galleries across the UK. In the meantime, we had been funded as a project by government to create toolkits for various areas of the public sector, including actually government itself. And seeing this, Lindsay Jones at Manchester Museum said that there's a space and demand for a toolkit for the museums and gallery sector. So applied to the Arts Council, and fortunately was successful in that funding bid, and that's led to a project called Roots and Branches, of which this training course is part.
Welcome to Carbon Literacy for Museums. This presentation will give you a brief introduction to the Carbon Literacy project and the development of the Carbon Literacy Toolkit for museums. My name's Alison Criddle and I'm Carbon Literacy Officer for Museum Development Northwest, working with Lancaster Museum.
I'm Jack Rose-Worden. I'm the Museums Coordinator for the Carbon Literacy project. So what is carbon literacy? Carbon literacy is an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities and the abilities to reduce emissions on an individual, community and organisational basis. Carbon literacy is not a science lesson. It's designed to empower participants to take action and support action and create a low carbon culture in their workplaces and their communities and beyond. So for the carbon literacy training, participants must undertake a day of learning accredited by the Carbon Literacy project. Certification is the name of the game. At the end of the training, you'll pledge 2 significant actions and to reduce carbon emissions. And these will be reviewed by the Carbon Literacy project at the end of your training. And ideally, these actions will take place in your workplace. One will be an individual action that you do yourself, and the other will be a group action, which you can do as part of a team. So the Carbon Literacy project is a large-scale educational programme that originated in Manchester. And so far, over 22,000 people have been trained, and they have pledged over 44,000 low-carbon actions. So with this infographic, you can really get a scale of the project and how much good work has been done. And by participating now, you're contributing to this culture shift, which will help to deliver on climate targets.
So you might be asking yourself, why should museums act? Well, we in the development of the Carbon Literacy Toolkit have been asking other museums and organisations across the sector why this is important. And here are some of the things that we've been hearing.
So museums will be impacted by climate change, for one. And museums also have a carbon footprint, they create emissions. And engaging in carbon literacy will help museums align with the value and missions of museums and the sector.
Museums, we have a real responsibility there to their communities. They're also trusted within communities as well. Having this kind of learning helps us as organisations to keep up with change in legislation, to be engaged with funding requirements and opportunities to align values and missions. And ultimately, museums tell the biggest stories of our past, our present, and the possible futures that are to come. So this quote is from Esme Ward, Director of Manchester Museum. So tackling the climate crisis in our sector, she says, the climate and ecological crises call for collaborative working, collective action and cooperation both globally and locally. We are passionate about the role that museums can and should play in addressing the climate emergency. Carbon literacy enables us to take that action. So where are we at so far? The toolkit has been in development for the last few months. Between September and December, from autumn into winter, we are continuing to develop the toolkit and gaining insight from across the sector. We're also in the process of delivering pilot courses, testing out the materials and the activities, creating a trainer toolkit, and building the resources and refining it as we go. All with the aim of launching and rolling out the toolkit for the sector at the start of the new year. These next few slides will explain a little bit about Roots and Branches, the project that has enabled carbon literacy for museums. Carbon literacy and museum development Northwest go back quite a few years now. Back in 2010 to 15, the sustainability journey really began for MDNW with their Green Museums programme. Developed over 3 different courses, it really began to embed sustainability, mindsets, activities and opportunities within the training programme. In 2016, the first carbon literacy training was delivered by NDMW to staff from Manchester Museum. And over the next few years, between 2017 to 2020, carbon literacy became fully embedded within the MDNW Open Training Programme, enabling more people to become trained and to take carbon action. In 2021, Roots and Branches launched, with the first training session taking place on the first day of COP26, the 1st of November 2021. Over the next few years, we'll see Roots and Branches enabling museums to become carbon literate and taking climate action, rolling out training and scaling up the commitments that we can make. So Roots and Branches is kindly supported using public funding by Arts Council England and lottery funding. It's a collaboration between the Carbon Literacy Project, Museum Development England and Manchester Museum. It has really ambitious aims to train 1,500 people becoming carbon literate over the next 2 years. It's also a really great opportunity for museums to test new ideas for a more sustainable future. So the roots lie in Manchester Museum, hosting a cultural environment action co-working hub, having the role to support carbon literacy rollouts across the network. And the branches are you. So let's see how far we can grow. You might have seen a campaign on social media, Museum Carbon Stories. You might also have participated in it. This enables us to tell stories through thematic activities each week, to join in the conversation, to share stories from your museums or organisations, to join the conversation and to inspire learning, awareness and engagement with what's going on either in your museums or your collections if you have them, and to engage one another and the sector and beyond on the road towards COP26 and beyond. These slides will give you a little taste of the Carbon Literacy for Museums toolkit, the modules, the learning, and some of the activities that take place.
The Museums toolkit is 1 day's worth of learning, but you can create a delivery schedule that suits your museum. This could mean delivering in a single day, or it could mean delivering over a number of days. There are 4 modules in total. In module 1, you'll have an introduction to climate change science and the impacts of climate change. In module 2, we'll have a think about equity and vulnerability and the role of museums in taking climate action. And we'll also think about the co-benefits of taking climate action. So how will taking climate action positively impact your museum in other ways? For module 3, we'll think about the policy position, both nationally and internationally, and we'll look at carbon footprints. And finally, in module 4, we'll have a bit of practice having climate conversations, and we'll start to think about your actions. So everything that you will learn during your training is guiding you towards taking action. So by the end of your training, you will have learned. You'll have gained an understanding of the basic science of climate change and the international context of climate policy. You'll have gained an understanding of how climate change will affect museums. You'll have explored the impact that museums can have on tackling climate change. You'll have created an action plan to help reduce the carbon footprint of your museum. And finally, you'll have explored strategies for influencing others to take action on climate change.
So now it's time to think about the role of museums in tackling climate change and reducing emissions. So what are some of the ways in which climate change can impact museums? There are things like temperature and humidity issues for collections care, but also the well-being of staff and visitors. There's the insurance and extra costs of wanting to future-proof and protect buildings and collections. That can be fed in from extreme weather events such as flooding and the impact that can have on infrastructure and leaky roofs that cost more money. There's also things like tourism and footfall. Who are we getting through our doors, or how are people experiencing the collections that we have? Issues like pests and the impact that they can have on collections and care and protecting them for the future. and how climate change ultimately impacts on all of us as citizens and members of our communities. So it's really important that we begin with some understanding of the cultural carbon footprint, so the carbon footprint of our own sector. This screenshot that you're seeing is lifted from the Arts Council England 2019 to 20 environmental report and gives you a snapshot or a bird's eye view of the impacts of emissions and environmental impacts of the sector. So you can see in the top right hand corner that during the year 76,049 tonnes of carbon dioxide were emitted by organisations within the sector, so 636 different reporting national portfolio organisations. Museums, you can see on the bottom pie chart, make up 24% of those carbon footprint emissions. So around a quarter of the sector's emissions are coming from museums. So that might be reported through touring, exhibitions, from business travel, from water consumption and usage, from waste, and from energy as well. So having this snapshot begins to help us to unpick where our impacts for our emissions lie and what actions we might be wanting to take, both as individual organisations and as a wider sector.
So what role could museums have? Some possibilities include museums acting as role models in our society, displaying the best practice on climate action. It could include museums empowering communities and staff by delivering education on climate change and offering space to climate change related activities. And it could mean incorporating environmental responsibility across their whole structure, developing action plans and helping to reduce their own emissions.
So museums can have a role as influencers and as advocates for the change that we want to see. We can tell stories, as we've seen from the Museum Carbon Stories campaign, but also through our collections, through our teams, through our staff, through the work that we do. And we can reimagine what our institutions might be, the responsibilities that we have, and the changes that we want to see. The Carbon Literacy for Museums toolkit has been designed to offer a range of different activities to help engage participants so that we can work independently, with examples such as self-guided learning, to activities such as collaborative discussion and group work in live sessions. Here in the next few slides, we've highlighted a few activities from across the toolkit to share with you so that you can get a sense of some of the topics covered, the ways in which the toolkit is tailored specifically to our unique museum sector, and how we want to build in different case studies to help with our learning. One of the activities explores the spheres of influence, so who we can impact to take climate action and what our role is as museums and members of museums communities. I always like to think of it as imagining that we're a pebble being thrown into a river or a lake, and when it hits the surface of the water, it has that ripple effect. So this is essentially thinking about how far our ripples can go.
So we'll think about this as a group. These are some of the people we could influence, so ranging from trustees and councillors to funders to our families and our personal communities. And within the training, we explore this with case studies from across the sector. This activity really emphasises the scope of the influence that communities and museums can have. And it also really helps to guide you towards taking action within your sphere of influence.
Following on from that, we start to envision what might a low carbon museum look like. So this activity is usually done as groups in breakout rooms we've shared online, or in a workshop format we'd be working together in a space. It's all about sharing ideas, thinking about how can we reduce the emissions caused by the operations and activities of our museums. So everything from what it takes to switch the lights on, through to caring for our collections, through to amazing programming for our audiences and visitors. So working together, we think about collaborative ideas sharing. What key actions could we take? What are the shared issues that we have, and what's unique for our specific institution? what might the barriers be? How do we identify them and think about how might they be overcome or addressed or engaged with? And who would need to support us to do this and how? So again, it might be thinking about those spheres of influences that we have involved. We'll explore this through 4 different themes. So envisioning what that low carbon museum might look like, we'll think about things like procurement, so everything that we procure or obtain in order to do the work that we do, whether it's computers and IT, to food and drink in catering or cafes, to collections care management technology, a whole range of different things that we have in order to do the work that we do. We'll explore waste. So what we create, what we do with it, where it goes afterwards, how we reduce it, the emissions that are caused by it, and how we engage others to reduce that impact as well. Energy, so whether it's the lighting in a gallery space or to control humidity or temperatures within a collections presentation, through to old or historic buildings, or how we're developing, if we're thinking about capital projects or new buildings, new technologies, how do we make those changes? Who do we need to engage with? What barriers are we currently facing? And then we'll explore transport. So how do we get to and from work? How do we enable others to access our spaces and engage with it? And how do we make those reductions whilst also continuing to produce amazing work that's unique to our own institutions? Throughout the training, we're building our learning continuously and understanding the scale of impact that we can have as museums and individuals working together. Our responsibility is to take climate action, and the training also helps to shine a light on the wider implications of the action that we're taking and how it can align with different issues at play within our sector.
So we know that taking climate action as a museum doesn't just have to be seen as a challenge, it's also an opportunity. There are a lot of co-benefits to taking climate action as a museum. We use the co-benefits of climate action activity to discuss this as a group, think about real life case studies from museums, and think about the different co-benefits that taking climate action can and will have. So some of the co-benefits include future-proofing. So that is an action that not only reduces carbon emissions, but also prepares your museum for future impacts of climate change, and also puts your museum on the right path for funding requirements. A lot of funding bodies now require environmental responsibility to receive that funding. Another co-benefit is partnerships and collaboration. So how do climate actions enable your museum to make partnerships with different suppliers, different artists, different groups in the community? And so we explore this using these real life case studies. So for example, we have one here from Brunel Museum.
So one example that Brunel has undertaken is to develop a plan and building it into all areas of their organisation. So this sustainability plan can be a really great first step in a museum or gallery's climate action journey, or it can be a continuous work in progress to report to and align with. So Brunel announced in August 2021 how they will decarbonise the museum, how they will continue to sustainably develop the sites and use their platform, their presence, to increase awareness in climate action and create partnerships. So thinking again about those spheres of influence as well.
So some of the co-benefits that as a group we might uncover include financial sustainability. So developing a plan and embedding it across the whole work stream of the museum can lead to reduced costs, whether that's right now or in the future due to sort of investments in green technology. It also has really great co-benefits for the museum's reputation. It puts the museum at the forefront of climate action within the sector. And it also has the opportunity to lead to audience development. For example, Brunel Museum might be engaging in exhibitions that think about climate change and the impacts that might be had on the community. and this could lead to, enhanced audience interest. So basically, the idea of the activity is to really enable us to think about the multitude of different benefits that taking climate action will have, not just reducing emissions. It really has just loads of different benefits for your museum.
And the co-benefits really help us to identify the collaborative impact of working together as a group and taking responsibility within that group to act. So the training across all of the modules is guided towards creating your own action plan. So at the end of the day's worth of training, we will create our own action plans. Within that, there is a requirement to create one action that you can implement on your own, and to create one action that you can implement together with your colleagues or your collaborators. And these are all built into the carbon literacy action plan template that we provide to you. So we're thinking about how we get our society towards carbon neutral. How do we achieve these targets? What are our commitments? What are our actions going to be? We consider the impact that we can have, the carbon reductions potential that we can take, and how we can work together to embed those actions to take meaningful action. So at the end of all of this, it's submitted to the Carbon Literacy Project for certification to enable you as a learner to become carbon literate and to encourage you to take your actions forward into your organisation. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of a sense of some of the learning, the content, how we work together to share our ambition and to take responsibility towards taking climate action and reducing carbon. So what's next in the timeline? We continue to develop the Carbon Literacy for Museums toolkit throughout the autumn, and there's a few pilot courses that are being run to help us to understand how everything is coming together and to make refinements so that we are ready to launch the toolkit and roll it out from January 2022. So there's some contact details on screen, so you can find out more about the Carbon Literacy Project and about the Roots and Branches project from Museum Development UK. And we're really looking forward to being able to share this with you and for you to take the training to support you to take climate action in your museums and beyond.
Dippy on Tour was the Natural History Museum's famous Diplodocus cast that toured around the country. Dippy took pride of place in the Council's energy efficient offices, number 1 Riverside, a building that incorporates renewable and low carbon technology. A fitting venue for Dippy, who has become an ambassador for the natural world. At Touchstones, we hosted an accompanying exhibition to complement Dippy's stay, using our collections to tell a story of the past, the present and the future. Through the project, across both sites, we engage audiences of all ages in conversations about our crucial role in the future of the planet. We hope that visitors were inspired and left with an increased awareness of the steps we can all take to help to protect the natural world. It's no exaggeration to say that Dippy is a national treasure, and we were honoured to host him here in Rochdale on behalf of the North West. We split our exhibition spaces at Touchstones into 3 sections with 3 main themes, 1 in each of the gallery spaces. 1, dinosaurs, 2, prehistoric Rochdale, and 3, our amazing planet and how we can protect it. We wanted to ensure the entire exhibition was interactive and informative, so families could learn together in a fun and friendly way. Working with exhibition designers and many partners to bring the exhibition to life, we used our own collections alongside loaned objects from the Natural History Museum and Manchester Museum's collection. So, our dinosaur space was a chance for visitors to explore the gallery and learn more about dinosaurs, how they lived and what happened to them through their slow decline and mass extinction. It was also a space to find out how museums ensure our understanding of these animals continues to grow. The gallery included lots of objects, including dinosaur bones, teeth, bird skeletons, a meteorite, and even some fossilised dinosaur poo. Interactives included a flapping pterodactyl, which is not a dinosaur, and a mini T-Rex 3D jigsaw, and also a packing bones into a museum crate activity. The second gallery was an immersive space that looked at how the environment in Rochdale would have looked 150 million years before the dinosaurs roamed the earth. Using our collection of fossils from Sparth Bottoms, a site in Rochdale where, in 1894, a selection of fossils from the Carboniferous period were found, and geologists from all over the country flocked to see the site. A huge image of moving plants and life from this period was represented on a projection, and our famous Sparth scorpion was brought to life using AR in this space. Our last and largest gallery spaces looked at the future and was meant to inspire audiences to make a change. The main message was that no living thing is too small to make a difference. No species, no human, no insect or plant. By working together, each doing our own bit, we can help protect the future of our amazing planet. The area was split into climate change, loss of habitat, cause and consequence, and cooperation. Here we had a massive eco-floor game, a wall full of insects to show the biodiversity of life, with lots of facts about the impact of what we do and the effect that this can have on the planet. A pledge wall where we asked people to make a change on our beehive, and a swarm of knitted bees suspended from the ceiling. Each of these bees was made by a member of our community through a call out we undertook. We had bees sent from far and wide, with even a few sent from Spain. We also had a film showcasing some of the fabulous, sustainable projects that were and are happening right here in Rochdale. It makes sense here to mention the carbon literacy training that most of our staff and volunteers were offered and took part in, that armed us to talk about sustainability through our exhibition. The training gave us an understanding of what climate change is and its effects, providing us with sufficient information to be able to make our own decisions about what we can do to reduce our own carbon footprint, both in a personal and professional capacity. It was all going well, too well. We had visitors queuing around the building, and then COVID-19 struck. We were open for a total of 5 weeks, and then we went into the first lockdown. During lockdown, most staff were furloughed, but we managed to reimagine our exhibition, changing it from a hands-on experience to a completely different, socially distanced and mask-wearing offer, with an actor-led interpretation. 3 scientists travelled back in time to search for a solution of how to save the planet. They needed to gather information about the past to do this. First, they visited our Touchstones exhibition to learn about the dinosaurs. Then, they travelled back 240 million years to visit Rochdale in the Carboniferous era. Then, after learning all about the environment from the wise Rochdalians, the scientists can go back to the future, knowing that the world's missing knowledge has been found.
Hi, hello, my name's Jenny Dowell and I'm the site supervisor at Judges Lodgings Museum. A couple of years ago, I undertook carbon literacy training with Museum Development Northwest, just as an individual member of staff. Went down to Preston for it, and although I was expecting a little bit of a jolly, to be honest, when I got there and went through the training, I found myself experiencing an incredible mixture of rage and upset. So the content, yeah, just made me very, very angry, and also, you know, I cried a few times because, you know, it was just so upsetting. But the great thing about carbon literacy training is it's all about action, inspiring you into action. So I had an individual commitment and then a kind of museum commitment, and that was about forming a green team. So when we got back, it was a combination of volunteers and staff got together and we formed this green team. So since then, what we've done a number of things. A major bit of that was applying for a sustainable improvement grant, which we got £1,000 from Museum Development Northwest, which enabled us to do sort of a number of things. In fact, it changed quite a lot through the progress of the grant for a number of reasons. But anyway, one of the things was we got a hot bin for the garden. So when that's up and running to temperature, we'll be able to recycle food, so which otherwise goes for waste. Both from staff, but also we have school groups. We also have bought some bike racks, and once they're installed, we can use that as a way of encouraging sustainable transport. I'm a cyclist myself, and actually going through carbon literacy training again, I'm umming and ahhing about what my personal action should be. And one of the things I'm thinking about is about transport, how people get here. So that would be staff, volunteers, visitors, and all that sort of thing. So yes, we are now one of the pilot museums for the Root and Branches museum specific carbon literacy training. So yeah, that's going to mean a number of things for us, but I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. So yes, other things that we've done. This was a good portion of the grant was replacing our existing bulbs with the LEDs. Now I think with the whole issue of climate change, there's a big thing about getting the urgency across and also making the case for action. So whereas, you know, clearly there's a very strong ethical case, a moral one, and, you know, and all that sort of thing. Nevertheless, quite often I think we need to make the economic case, and just as an example with the LED lights. So we have reduced energy consumption, so our bills will be lower. We're using much less raw materials, so we're not having to replace. Previous to the LED bulb, getting the LED bulbs, I was regularly replacing bulbs. Some, you know, our fittings aren't the most modern of things, and I think, but I haven't had to replace a single LED bulb. So that's, yeah, we haven't had to spend money. Yes, we had to pay for the original bulbs, but then we've not had to pay for replacements. It's saved a lot of my time, because I was up and down ladders all the time. And there's a lower fire risk because they're not generating heat. So, and again, I think that's another of the good things about the climate literacy training. It really makes the case. And this specific one, obviously directed at museums, is you know, why as museums should we be interested, and making the case for us taking action. So that was one of the things, was with the light bulbs. We're very lucky here in that we've got a small garden. It's not many people know about it. It's this lovely little secret garden, and it's managed by, we have a volunteer team, a small but dedicated volunteer team who look after it. We have sort of fortnightly-ish events, so that's obviously good in terms of, carbon literacy. It involves everything, health and well-being and all that sort of thing, and it's good for the volunteers. But then we've all, because we've got a nice space now, that we've got lots of outdoor games, so that's obviously again good for the health and well-being of our visitors. The way it's planted, there's an awful lot of flowers that provide a succession of flowers throughout the season, so it's very good for the pollinators. We've still got a number of things in flower now, but right from early spring through to autumn, so that's good for bees and other pollinators. We did have the local beekeeper association came and did an event, which a lot of people came to, and that was really good. And obviously the case for pollinator plants is the same for honeybees as it is for the wild bees and the pollinators. Something that I'm quite interested in is there's these things called bioblitzes, where you go to an area and you record absolutely everything that you can find within it in a day or a weekend or whatever. And I know we've had a look at the plants within the garden, and we've already got, apart from the ones planted on purpose, the sort of wildflowers and the grasses and things like that, we've got over 60 species. So I think that's really interesting to show how much biodiversity you can have within a small space. So there's lots of ways we are using the garden, and we can go further to use it. So looking forwards then, what we're going to do. So in the very, very immediate future, that's first weekend of November, there's the Light Up Lancaster event, and we will be hosting in our garden this display called Polar, I think, and that obviously clearly relates to climate change, because it's polar bears, and with the destruction, with the loss of the ice sheets, they're really struggling for habitat and finding food and all that sort of thing. We're going to, in the pilot, we've got another 2 staff and a volunteer going through the carbon literacy training. We want to take that a lot further. I'm going to hopefully become a trainer myself, so that I can deliver it to the rest of the staff team and the green team members and other volunteers as well. And action coming out of that, again, because the carbon literacy training is all about action. Well, each one of us will come away with an individual action, but then we'll have group actions, and part of that will be developing a sustainability action plan. So looking at across all areas of what we do, whether it's collections, care, work with schools, how people travel here, across the board, there's lots of things that we can do so that we get it embedded in everything. So one of the things we've talked about is getting, decisions run by the green team. So whether it's about an exhibition or whatever, where we source, so we've got a shop, how do we source stuff for the shop, and that sort of thing. And then hopefully, we're a county council museum, we'd like to promote this within the whole of the county museum service. So that's kind of where we're going to. And I shall leave it there. Thanks for listening.
So my name is Stephanie Fletcher and I'm the Assistant Curator at the University of Salford Art Collection. We're a modest but ambitious collection of modern and contemporary art, and we develop our collection through new commissions. Relationships with the environment and climate change are increasingly important in our work and programming. I took part in the carbon literacy training through Museums Development North West in 2019, and it was a really valuable process. We're lucky enough to work with a range of internal and external partners at the university, helping us to tackle issues like climate change across bigger and wider audiences. And one recent project that we'd really like to share is our pilot Artist in Residence programme at Energy House, which is a world-leading science research facility on campus. It consists of a full-size 2-bedroom brick-built terraced house, built inside an environmentally controllable chamber, which can produce snow, rain, wind and more. And the facility tests and researches energy efficiency measures designed to improve our homes. This residency is in partnership with Open Eye Gallery in Liverpool, who also focus on climate issues in their work this year, and the scientist Dr. Richard Fitton, who leads the Energy House project. So I'd now like to introduce our residency artists, Stephanie and Stephen. Can you tell us a bit more about your work and this project?
Our work. Well, if you want to bit of background about who we are, we're a partnership of 2 photographers, and we've actually worked as both commissioned and commercial photographers, sort of freelancing for over 25 years. We've had an interest in the built environment and landscape photography. That's been our background in both our personal and our commissioned work. So we came at it from that background of sort of photographing a lot of domestic properties through our sort of commercial side, and also working on a lot of landscape personal projects that we've done in the past.
So just focusing on the Energy House residency, so obviously you've been working there with scientists. Can you tell us what you learned from each other's practices? So that work across the kind of arts and science backgrounds and the different reaching audiences and different working practices.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that sort of really occurred to us was the ways of approach were quite similar in some respects, I think, to the way that we work, particularly from a collaborative point of view. I mean, so much of what we did for what we call our research is about conversation. And so much of what they're doing is like discussing and analysing and then working out and thinking what they've got to do next. So it's very similar to the problem solving in a creative process. So you know, it's that problem solving and discussing and organising that is very similar. I think a big difference is probably that they're actually looking for some final answer, and I'm not sure that we ever find an answer or ever really looking for one.
Yeah, I think that's a big difference. I think because obviously, you know, scientific principles tend to be based on, and I'm generalising here, observation, careful observation, hypothesis, and then experimentation to either prove or disprove the hypothesis. So in many ways, and I think that relates quite closely to our practice in photography. I mean, photography has always been bound up in technology anyway. And in a sense, it does measure things. In one sense, it measures light, and whether that converts the sort of silver in a piece of film, or whether that creates an electrical current in a microchip, or light sensitive chip. So in one sense, it's those two things are very much bound together. And I think what's also important in both practices is the sense of imagination. You know, you might think that science is quite dry, but in many ways, it's imagining maybe what could or couldn't happen. And in one sense, that is a big part of scientific practice, as well as sort of more creative practices in the arts.
And I think particularly with the Energy House, I mean, there's one thing that sort of really occurred to us when we went in there, was that it was imagining people in the space, and what they've done is actually sort of created what looks like tripods with little balls hanging on them that to represent people. So they've actively imagined people in the space, because this is about people and their comfort. So it's that sort of that link of, I think, imagination and leaps of imagination and creative problem solving, I think, is probably very similar.
Yeah, I think I really like what you're saying there about the idea that you're both, it's all about conversations, and it's all about discussion. I always like to think perhaps the artists are asking questions in order to generate more questions, maybe, whereas the scientists are also asking questions, but ultimately they do want some answers. So I think there's like some quite nice synergies there about endless questions and answers, and especially how that might kind of relate to an audience as well. So I wanted to pick up a bit on your images in particular. One thing that we thought about around this project is that media and photography around climate change can often really be dominated by really overwhelming images. So we think of like melting icebergs, floods, all that kind of thing. Whereas your work focuses on the small, everyday sort of domestic details. And I think that's what can make a real impact, possibly with audiences. So can you tell us a bit more about your approach in terms of your images?
Well, I think that was probably when we looked at, when our research really covered so many things, in that we looked at our carbon footprint. We spoke to the Tyndall Centre to talk to them about carbon. We spoke to Manchester, to City of Trees, to talk about sort of tree planting. We obviously were in contact with the RHS Bridgewater, again, about planting and greening of areas. We were sort of had this huge sort of vast array of all different directions that the work could go in. But we wanted to draw on the work that we do anyway. So we do a lot of domestic photography, domestic property photography. I mean, we do big sort of commercial buildings as well, but we do a lot of domestic photography. And we wanted to incorporate those skills that we have into the project, and also to reflect that idea of a home, rather than it being a house that's an experimental space, to make it look like a home that people could recognise and relate to. And I think that sort of came really from that idea of thermal comfort. We wanted the house to look comfortable.
Was there anything else that really surprised you about the residency? Anything that you found out, or anything about your own practices, or perhaps what was being communicated to audiences?
I think probably something that was different for us to use was that we'd not used thermal imaging cameras before, had we? No. So it was sort of taking us again on another direction that we'd not used before. I mean, we'd done infrared photography with black and white film, hadn't we? But obviously using the thermal imaging cameras and the range of sort of like psychedelic colours that you get from them is just, and it was something that we really wanted to include, wasn't it? Once we saw those colours, we really wanted to involve that in the overall pictures. So I think that was something that had sort of extended our sort of practice a bit, wasn't it? Was using an entirely different camera to what we'd used before, that gives you an entirely different image. And it's that idea again of visualizing something that isn't visible, which is,
I think that runs through the whole project, doesn't it, really? You know, that obviously that the layering of the photographs that we did, you know, is making visible the invisible in many ways. And you know, obviously human beings have very limited senses in many ways, and there's many things that we can't experience, we can't see or hear or touch in many ways. And so making visible the invisible was, I think, a sort of a theme that went through the work, isn't it?
And I think there's always something with our other practice, really, our other personal practice, is that I think both of us like photographs that are revelatory. There's an element in there that you've not seen before or not been able to notice before. And I think probably using those thermal imaging cameras, it was another layer of revelation, wasn't it, about what is there?
Yeah. And it was
I really like that being a layer of revelation. So you said those are very much a practical tool for the scientists at the house, you know.
Yeah.
But when it's, you know, because final images are amazing, like you said, they are so colourful, so psychedelic, and you've really played with the colours. And it makes them really attractive as images, doesn't it, as well? So it's great that you've been able to tap into that in those photos.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's an important point, because obviously, you know, part of the brief was to communicate ideas to the general public, and in many ways, you know, making them attractive, making them visually attractive, drawing people in, making people want to look at them, because there's lots of hidden details in the photographs. You know, that we wanted to make them entertaining as well. You know, I think that's an important part. And I think a lot of science can be very dry, and it can turn people off in many ways. But if you can make it entertaining, it draws people in, and then they discover things about their own environment, their own, you know, environmental issues in this case. But, you know, that we're very conscious that we wanted people to actually spend time and look at the photographs and, you know, work out what was going on in them. And I think we've succeeded.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, your images will enter our permanent collection as part of our dynamic commission to collect model. So I just wanted to ask what that means for you and for these images to be going into a permanent collection.
Well, I think it's very pleased. You know, obviously that you know that when you take photographs, when you make work, you want it to be seen by people, but also you want it to you want the feeling that it will exist for a long time, and that there's that idea of legacy, I guess. You know, that people can they'll be made available for people to see, hopefully far into the future. You know, so that's very important, and to know it resides in an important, you know, sort of collection like Salford, where we get the sense they will be kind of looked after and preserved. You know, that's important to us.
Yeah, I think I don't know, maybe it's one of those things. I've never thought of this before, but I'm wondering whether it's, you know, people create art because, you know, they want to live forever. It's important because of it's at this point, actually the point that we are at the moment, that, you know, there is the considerations of climate change and the devastating effects it's having on, you know, and I think it's quite important to have some work in there that will say, well, this is what they were, you know, this is what people were thinking in 2021, and we don't know, you know, say in 2031 what they or 2051 what they're going to be thinking, but they'll be there.
Finally, I just wanted to ask what's next for the work and where people are going to be able to see it.
Well, we do know that it has been organised for January, that there are some of the images going in what's called a climate lab at the Open Eye Gallery in Liverpool.
I think that's the end of January, beginning of Feb.
Yeah. And that's the next place it's going to be, and we are hopeful. Well, it will be going into the Look exhibition as part of Liverpool Look Photo Festival next year, but we're not sure how it's going to be displayed or where.
And I should mention as well that it is also in the COP26 Universities Innovation Showcase, which is also online alongside this museum's COP26 event. That's all my questions. Have you got anything else to add?
No,
I think so.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's nice to you know, have the work sort of out there and for people to be able to see it.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Bridget Mackenzie. I'm going to talk about putting an echo lens on things, which is a new programme from Climate Museum UK. We are a small, newish, mobile and distributed museum. We don't have a building, but we work in partnership across the country, and we work in direct ways with audiences, and then also to develop professional skills of people in museums and other cultural organisations. And Echo Lens on Things is our professional development programme. And it's all about developing ways that we might collect and interpret artefacts of all kinds, including sites, in this time of Earth crisis. So seeing through the lenses of climate change and ecology in a wider way. It means collaborating on funded projects with partners to apply it practically, which will enable us to work with and develop the skills of emerging practitioners and provide opportunities to community groups to work in participatory ways. We'll also be creating an Echo Lens on Things toolkit to support these partnerships. So I'm going to talk a bit about some of the themes and ideas behind it. So why Echo Lenses? Well, it enables you to put a fresh and relevant slant on your collections in ways that involve people and help them make meaningful connections. It can enable us to develop skills in people, so developing abilities for people to connect with nature and develop understanding, deeper understanding of how to live better in nature. It can help you develop your organisation, so it can be a route to facing the climate and ecological emergency, inspiring a whole museum sustainability shift that isn't just about your operations, but looks to how you might interpret your collections and look out to your community. And of course, also putting an echo lens on things helps you serve the needs of the planet. So putting all of these things together, you can have a positive impact on your human and biodiverse communities in your bioregions and the planet as a whole. So just to mention that thinking bioregionally is actually about putting an echo lens on places rather than seeing places in terms of human imposed borders or nations. Part of our approach with putting an echo lens on things is to think about the role of culture. What's its purpose? What can museums do in this time of emergency? So we asked the question, what if we put creativity and culture in the donut? And the donut is the economic model of Kate Raworth, which is about creating a safe and just space for humanity within the limits of the planet. And we've come up with 8 different pathways that a museum or cultural organisation might follow. They might try to do it all, but the most reasonable approach is to maybe take 2 or 3 pathways and see how you can develop your sustainability work that way. And another beginning approach or starter is to put an echo lens onto ourselves. So in any training session, we might begin by seeing ourselves as an ecosystem, being as part of life, being an integrated part of the principles of nature, following those same principles of nature. And for example, we are an ecosystem, we contain multitudes. A healthy person contains up to 4,000 species of microbiota. Our resources would help you think about the learning from nature and thinking systemically and thinking in ways that are also embracing complexity and ambiguity. So for example, on the left, this is a resource about the principles of biomimicry that might be useful for putting an echo lens on your collections. So there isn't just one echo lens. There are many, many ways of putting an echo lens on things. And you can be as creative as you like. You might physically create things that represent lenses. You might employ artists or young people to create visual tools that allow visitors to look through or sense with an owl's eyes or any other species, or to see things in ways where there are no boundaries between forms of life. or maybe to see from a cloud's perspective, or to see from the perspective of an element like water. Maybe an echo lens might help you see deep into the past or future, to collapse time or to see time as circular. Maybe to look systemically to see how everything is interconnected. Maybe to see with microscopic vision, or to see into life worlds that exist on another scale. But really, to look ecologically is to look with the biggest, the most expanded lens possible. And depending on your collection, you might choose to focus on people, for example, the experiences of people whose land, bodies, and cultures have been exploited. Or you might really focus on materials, looking at the systems of extraction and production and trade of commodities. You might look at places, so the histories of extractivism and climate change in cities or nature reserves. Or you might look at the more than human. So, for example, you might explore the extraction of animal and plant kin through hunting or breeding. But it might be interesting if you don't just focus on the obvious. So if you've got a natural history collection, maybe choose the angle of looking at materials or people instead of just the more than human approach. And we've also developed a possible narrative for a set of objects. So you could think about bringing together a set of collections and looking at them in terms of past, present, and future, putting an echo lens on things, but starting by asking, how are these objects a clue to what has happened in the past? What is the human story? How do they provide evidence of lost contexts or of a world in flux? You might look at objects as comfort or as a tool for helping us connect and cope and express ourselves right now in this earth crisis. And then looking into the future, you might see objects as a compass for where do we go into the future? How do we envision a more sustainable world? So I've just talked through some of the ideas in our Echo Lens on Things program, which is really just at the beginning. And if you'd like to find out more, you can contact us on climatemuseumuk@gmail.com. So thanks for listening.
Hi, Max.
Hi there.
Hi, thanks for agreeing to talk to us about Manchester Jewish Museum's redevelopment and the sustainability work that you've been doing. Firstly, could you tell me a bit about yourself and a bit about the museum and the redevelopment?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Max Dunbar. I'm Chief Exec of Manchester Jewish Museum. I've been at the museum for over 10 years now. And over the last 10 years, we've been working on a major development project. So we've been looking at how we can transform the museum, creating new spaces, extending the museum, which has always been housed in a former synagogue. It's a grade 2-star listed historic synagogue site. And over the past 10 years, we've been looking at how we can grow our spaces to enable us to house and display more of our collection, and to do more activities for a broad range of different audiences and local communities.
Fantastic, thank you. And I know this redevelopment's been sort of long in the planning, and the museum's received some fantastic feedback from the public since you opened in early July this year. So it's been a process, like you said, of restoration and expansion. So I'm keen to hear about what impact that's had on your energy consumption, you know, considering you've got bigger in size.
Sure. So we've doubled in size, but despite doubling in size, our sort of overall energy use and our sort of carbon impact has actually reduced by 20%. And it was, this was a real sort of a key factor behind a major factor behind the project. How do we create a new museum building that's environmentally sustainable and fit for purpose, for future generations? So we had a fantastic design team, fantastic engineer team. We worked with Bureau Happold to really sort of think about how we restore, refurbish our synagogue, build a new extension, but at the same time make sure our carbon footprint was reduced. So we had many workshops. We looked at the space, the building itself, the site itself is a very tight space, so we had to be really creative in how we go about coming up with those solutions, particularly working on a listed building where there are so many sort of restrictions in place. But they achieved it, and I think they were really sort of drawn by the architecture of the synagogue and had to think around the architecture. And for example, they came up with a system whereby they created it was a double floor slab underneath the modern extension, which now sort of heats and naturally ventilates the whole building. So it draws in air, and they use the old sun burners in the synagogue, and they now naturally ventilate the synagogue. So it was a combination of sort of new technology, but also using those historical features that now have produced this incredibly energy efficient museum.
Absolutely fantastic. And how nice that you've got new technologies mixed with, using some of the sort of traditional methods.
Yeah.
Wow, really fantastic.
Yeah. And it hasn't affected the integrity of the architecture, and you still come into the synagogue and you're wowed by sort of the interior, the design, the decorative schemes. But I think it's fascinating behind the scenes. It's, really, we have these high-tech systems that are ensuring, we sort of are hitting those carbon footprint targets and helping Manchester achieve its sort of net zero goals.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And also, looking after the collections as well for the long term. It's just what you want, isn't it? And
yeah.
The other aspects of the work that you're doing at the museum that are linked to environmental sustainability?
Yeah, so we are a new museum. We're a new Jewish museum, and we thought a new Jewish museum has to have a cafe. You have to have a cafe in most museums, but for a Jewish museum, it's essential. So we had many debates about our cafe and our menu, and we reopened as a vegetarian cafe, as a vegetarian kosher style cafe. Again, thinking about environmental sustainability, and now our menu is very much sort of driven by that. I think we're probably Manchester's only vegetarian kosher style cafe going. So again, it's played a really sort of important role in our thinking, not just in terms of the spaces, but what we do, how we behave. We're currently working on a new environmental action plan, so thinking about our suppliers, thinking about sort of the materials we use in the cafe and our education workshops. So it really has sort of impacted not just what we've created, but how we now sort of work in this new museum.
Well, that's fantastic. So you've got this sort of new action plan that you're developing. And so are there other things that you're looking at in particular in terms of, ways to mitigate the museum's impact, or how you can support communities and partners to take action as well?
Yeah, so we are members of MAST, the Manchester Arts Sustainable Team. So we sort of play a role in the wider sort of citywide sector in terms of learning from others, and as well as supporting others. And I think as a new build with these systems in place, it's a great opportunity to bring other cultural partners in to show them what can be achieved. So yeah, we feel as though we have this responsibility. We've got this great new building, so It's about sharing what we've learned over the last 10 years with others, and hopefully, you know, that will influence further sort of new buildings and decisions around how buildings are operated.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. So thanks very much, Max, for agreeing to talk to me today. And yeah, I just can't wait to see what comes next with your action plan.
Oh, thanks so much, Kay. Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Gelsthorpe and I'm Curator of Earth Science Collections at Manchester Museum here at the University of Manchester. And we're currently working on a new exhibition on rewilding and what it means to be wild. So fundamentally, conservation has been failing. So we've got widespread biodiversity loss across the planet, and obviously we're dealing with the consequences of climate change. But rewilding gives a really different approach to conservation, where we can look at widespread habitat restoration, both on land and sea, and fundamentally reconnect people with nature. And our exhibition and programme will be very rooted within some brilliant research at the University of Manchester and beyond. So we'll be looking at things like the reintroduction of wolves at Yellowstone and the dramatic kind of knock-on effects this has had on things like different bird populations. We'll be looking at different baselines for conservation, because one of the problems with conservation currently is that it uses pre-industrial points to look at restoring natural habitats. And really this is missing out a lot of processes. So for example, we have a fabulous collection from the last ice age here at the University of Manchester. And here we've got an incredible bison that lived in Derbyshire during the last ice age more than 10,000 years ago. And this would have had a dramatic effect on turning over soil, fertilising it, and also lots of other animals would have been around at that time that we no longer have, such as the predators like lynx, wolves and bears. And these would have had a dramatic impact on things like deer populations, which are obviously very prevalent today. So we're looking at different baselines to reintroduce different processes back into the natural habitat today. And other research that we're looking to bring into this exhibition are, for example, the research from the University of Exeter around the reintroduction of beavers. So this has had an amazing impact in the last few years. Beavers haven't been in Britain for the last 400 years or so, but now, after lots of reintroduction projects, we do know that beavers not only have a big impact on biodiversity, but have a significant impact on things like mitigation of flooding, carbon sequestration, and really dramatic impact on things like water quality. So we're bringing this research to the public for the first time as part of this exhibition. So rewilding is also key to elements of our teaching here at the University of Manchester. So my colleague Anna Gilchrist, for example, teaches around what it means to be wild and what rewilding means, and particularly things like the changing understanding of what wild is across the generations. And my colleagues here at Manchester Museum are currently teaching on an urban biodiversity course, which has wild as a central element to this teaching. But here at Manchester Museum, we want to use our wild exhibition to fundamentally change the world. We want to use this research to provoke debate and raise understanding amongst the public and really give a safe space for tackling these sometimes controversial issues. We want to inspire action and fundamentally give a legacy for this exhibition. And we want to bring what we discuss and what we explore in this exhibition back into research and teaching. And we've got this fabulous collection here at the University of Manchester, which tells us all sorts about biodiversity and climate change, and we want to use this collection to really make a difference to people's lives and give a positive, inspiring future that people can really aspire to.
Hello, my name is Francine Hayfrin and I am the Cultural Park Keeper at the Whitworth. So I joined the Whitworth in 2014, just before we reopened after our capital development. My post and the outdoor programme was funded by the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, and specifically with a focus to work with people to reconnect them to nature. So it was all about us being in this really urban location, but sadly, over the years, people, particularly maybe living in such locations, and have become more and more disconnected with nature. And so we wanted to turn that focus to work with families, visitors, residents close to the gallery to come back in, reconnect with the park, which was a thriving park when it first opened way back in around 1910. And the park was created for, obviously, for the gratification of the people of Manchester, to use it as a place to relax and enjoy and to improve their well-being. And so move forward to however many years later to where we are now, we have tried to re-establish that connection with the park and people, and getting people to use the park to connect to nature, and also using it to improve its well-being. So that is some of the context of the work that we have been doing. At the end of 2019, just before the lockdown, we embarked on a project with the Friends of Whitworth Park to create a new community garden within Whitworth Park. The construction things obviously were slightly delayed, but what this means that now, when we are able to reopen later this year, is that having this amazing space that is open to the community will allow us to be able to create more activities and provide more opportunities for people to learn about climate and environmental issues. So, for example, within the community garden, it is very focused on it being a useful space and a useful garden for residents, but also a very eco-friendly community garden. So embedded through activities and in the way we work, we will look around water sustainability. So the obvious things like creating providing water butts and things so that we can think more sustainably about the water that we use outdoors, and it just become part of people's everyday activity. Looking at things that obviously being completely chemical free within the community garden, but also looking at things like, through activities, being able to show people the benefits of us planting more trees and planting more green coverage like that, because obviously the evidence shows that if we're able to plant more trees, this aids with more transpiration, which takes less pressure, obviously, off the resources. So it's about being able to embed activities. And I think by having a space like the community garden, and even our outdoor programs, our outdoor program at the Whitworth, which continues to be free and accessible to everybody, it's just about giving people the opportunities to engage and to learn and to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
Port Sunlight is a village built to push the boundaries of what's possible, not as a utopian idealist dream, but as a sustainable and practical solution that meets the challenges of the day and sets up the community to prosper into the future.
William Lever, as a forward-thinking Victorian industrialist, understood the social and economic benefits of giving the workers in his factories access to high-quality green spaces. Space for leisure, space to appreciate the natural world, and space to breathe, away from the polluting factories that dominated the urban communities of the north of England at the time. Since its founding, Port Sunlight has been a community that looks to lead, to show how things can be done better, combining our beautiful architectural legacy with the latest technologies. This partnership of heritage with modern ideas and working with many different stakeholders is precisely how this community remains such a special and relevant place to live and work and visit. As custodians, Port Sunlight Village Trust has looked to continue this legacy, investing early in fully electric vehicles and constantly challenging ourselves to do better by seeking the judgment of outside expert advice through the Green Flag, Green Heritage and Green Tourism accreditations. But this approach was always a bit limiting, a bit isolated to those areas of the business that were quite literally green already. Those open green spaces could be greener. They could respond better to the problems of our modern world, and though we made great strides, we needed greater ambition.
We needed a strategic approach that joined up all areas of the business and embedded sustainability right into the heart of our workplace and culture. And why? Well, you'll have seen 100 reasons why from other people, but for us in Port Sunlight, we understand that this moral obligation to be better and do better for the environment also makes our village, our community, and the businesses that support it more financially sustainable. It sets up our 133-year-old village to prosper and lead the way for another 133 years and beyond. Port Sunlight is unique, with many stakeholders that contribute to its success. It has always been an inspiring place, and by embedding sustainability into its core, we have an opportunity to inspire further, to change attitudes and behaviours by showing what is possible when communities, business and government work towards the same goal. Delivered with match funding from Museum Development Northwest, Port Sunlight Village Trust commissioned the Environment Partnership to produce our environmental sustainability strategy. Based on the UN sustainability goals, the strategy defines our vision for environmental sustainability and describes key actions for improvement in 6 areas: energy, water, waste, transportation, business, and greening the village. The strategy includes a report with a comprehensive baseline study, environmental vision, aims, and action plan for delivery. It also has supporting documents that include an opportunity matrix for improving the thermal performance of Port Sunlight's listed buildings, and a more detailed energy study. Right from the beginning, the strategy has been people-focused, relying on the input of staff, volunteers, and our board. This understanding that it's the people who will drive this strategy forward, and that the varied professional and personal backgrounds of those involved in surveys and working groups is a crucial and critical factor in ensuring that this strategy is delivered in a meaningful way. So, our new vision. By 2030, we will improve our environmental performance and support our workforce, community, visitors and partners to be more sustainable, to create a greener future for everyone. Short, to the point, focused on ourselves, well perhaps, but that is really the point. In order to inspire and support others, we need to establish best practice at home. We need to know how that is achieved and how that is sustained. Our successful model can then be used to help other communities and organisations and to be that beacon that Port Sunlight has always been. Our key priorities in relation to environmental sustainability are reducing energy consumption, reducing water consumption, reducing the amount of waste we produce and increasing the amount that we recycle, encouraging sustainable transportation across the community, increasing and diversifying the planting around the village, improving well-being and being an inclusive and sustainable business. By delivering on these objectives over the next 10 years, our business will be in a better place, our community will be in a better place, and our environment will be in a better place. This is an exciting and forward-thinking strategy that can inspire our own staff as much as anyone else and make Port Sunlight an inspiring place to live, work and visit.
about you?
Me, Louise Wallwein. I'm just a poet and playwright, I'm not famous. We have 9 years. That's 108 months, that's 468 weeks, that's 3,285 days. That's almost 300 million seconds to decarbonise and harmonise, to work with nature's finite resources. We have the answers, we have the solutions. Let this be our legacy, our revolution to save this world. To calm the rising tides, to quench the thirst of forest fires. We know this isn't a drill. We know this is an emergency. Time to stop mucking about. Time to take responsibility. As every second counts, so does every human. Time to turn our carbon conscious, brilliant minds to keep this show on the road. How are we going to hold on to this priceless, fragile home of ours? Here in this city, they called it a revolution. The cogs of industry, the cogs of slavery and inequality gave birth to global scale pollution. Here in this city, another revolution grows. We are the city of radicalism, in a place teeming with creativity. We demand our fair share and to share fair. This time, no one should be left behind. Now the factories are forges of our imagination. We are a place of innovation, inspiration. Here in this city, we are learning new ways of working, linking culture and environment. We are sharing what we have, what we know. Let these seeds of change grow. We are fighting back. We have got nearly 300 million seconds. Think about what you love about our home. It's not about going without. It's about joining all the dots now, so no one's left with naught. If we all collected less stuff, there'd be more to go around. Small actions and big ones are casting our future. It's exciting. Imagine looking back in 300 million seconds time and knowing each time we collaborated, each time we put self-interest to one side, so that if Villette was painting our world in a decade, it would be clean air and the real colour of sunsets that he can see. The rivers cutting a smooth path, no more angry winds sweeping away the crops, no more melting ice, the North Pole and the South Pole left frozen and mysterious. Weather patterns restored. No more stinking landfills. We don't buy into waste anymore. Imagine knowing that it is we who pulled ourselves back from the brink. We listened to our striking children. We did it ourselves, together, because we acted on a chance to reclaim a future. It's ours. For each and all, for everyone. In 300 million seconds, we saved our beautiful world.